currently? It was September 28th in the year 1066 that William the Conqueror invaded England. Claiming his right to the English throne, William, Duke of Normandy, invades England at Pevensey on Britain's southeast coast. His subsequent defeat of King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings marked the beginning of a new era in British history. William was the illegitimate son of Robert I, Duke of Normandy, by his concubine Arlette, a tanner's daughter from the town of Falaise. The Duke, who had no other sons, designated William his heir, and with his death in 1035, William became Duke of Normandy at age 7. Rebellions were epidemic during the early years of his reign, and on several occasions the young Duke narrowly escaped death. Many of his advisors did not. By the time he was 20, William had become an able ruler and was backed by King Henry I of France. Henry later turned against him, but William survived the opposition and in 1063 expanded the borders of his duchy into the region of Maine. In 1051, William is believed to have visited England and met with his cousin, Edward the Confessor, the childless English king. According to Norman historians, Edward promised to make William his heir. On his deathbed, however, Edward granted the kingdom to Harold Godwinson, head of the leading noble family in England and more powerful than the king himself. In January of 1066, King Edward continued his eternity, and Harold Godwinson was proclaimed King Harold II. William immediately disputed his claim. In addition, King Harold III, Hardrad of Norway, had designs on England, as did Tostig, brother of Harold. King Harold rallied his forces for an expected invasion by William, but Tostig launched a series of raids instead, forcing the king to leave the English Channel unprotected. In September, Tostig joined forces with King Harold III and invaded England from Scotland. On September 25th, Harold met them at Stamford Bridge and defeated them both. They both continued their eternity on that day. 3 days later, William landed in England at Pevensey. With approximately 7,000 troops in cavalry, William seized Pevensey and marched to Hastings, where he paused to organize his forces. On October 13th, Harold arrived near Hastings with his army, and the next day, William led his forces out to give battle. At the end of a bloody, all-day battle, King Harold II continued his eternity, shot in the eye with an arrow, according to legend, and his forces were defeated. William then marched on London and received the city's submission. On Christmas Day, 1066, William the Conqueror was crowned the first Norman king of England in Westminster Abbey, and the Anglo-Saxon phase of English history came to an end. French became the language of the king's court and gradually blended with Anglo-Saxon tongue to give birth to modern English. William I proved an effective king of England, and the Domesday Book, a great census of the lands and people of England, was among his notable achievements. Upon the continuance of paternity of William I in 1087, his son William Rufus became William II, the second Norman king of England. Just a quick lesson and observation about our awesome English language. Words like falaise or hard rod, that can be also pronounced as hard rad, are just the way our language is because of the contributions of many other languages such as French, German, and I believe there's Latin. To give some comparison, we'll look at the Spanish language. Words like a don't change. The pronunciation is always a, so there's no confusion. The vowel I is always E. There's no confusion. The vowel E is always E. That way there's no confusion. The enunciation of the letters in the Spanish alphabet don't change. This way, when you pronounce something, you're always pronouncing it the correct way. Our awesome English language isn't like that. Due to the contributions, we have different ways we say things for different words. Don't feel bad. Just to drive my point home, there's even words that are pronounced different in the great old US of A than they pronounce them in the home of English, in England. In fact, the way we pronounce words in any region contributes to a general consensus that altogether contributes to the dialect of that region. It was September 28th in 1918. A Liberty Loan parade in Philadelphia prompts a huge outbreak of Spanish flu in the city. By the time the pandemic ended, an estimated 20 million to 50 million people continue their eternity worldwide. Influenza is a highly contagious virus that attacks the respiratory system and can mutate very quickly. It does this to avoid being killed by our human immune system. Generally, only the very old and very young are susceptible to death from the flu. Though a pandemic of the virus in 1889 had killed thousands all over the world, it was not until 1918 that the world discovered how deadly the flu could be. Most likely origin of the 1918 flu pandemic was a bird or farm animal in the American Midwest. The virus may have traveled among birds, pigs, sheep, moose, bison, and elk, eventually mutating into a version that took hold in the human population. The best evidence suggests that the flu spread slowly through the United States in the first half of the year, then spread to Europe via some 200,000 American troops who traveled there to fight in World War I. By June, the flu seemed to have mostly disappeared from North America after taking a considerable toll. Over the summer of 1918, the flu spread quickly all over Europe. One of its first stops was Spain, where it eventually became known the world over as the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was highly unusual because it seemed to affect strong people in the prime of their lives rather than babies and the elderly. By the end of the summer, about 10,000 people had continued their eternity. In most cases, hemorrhages in the nose and lungs killed the victims within 3 days. As fall began, the flu epidemic spiraled out of control. Ports throughout the world, usually the first locations in a country to be infected, reported serious problems. In Sierra Leone, 500 of 600 dock workers were too sick to work. Africa, India, and the Far East reported epidemics. The spread of the virus among so many people also seemed to have made it even more deadly and contagious as it mutated. When the second wave of flu hit London and Boston in September, the results were far worse than those from the previous flu strain. 12,000 soldiers in Massachusetts came down with the flu in mid-September. Each division of the armed services was reporting hundreds of deaths each week due to flu. Philadelphia was the hardest hit city in the United States. After the Liberty Loan Parade on September 28th, thousands of people became infected. The Liberty Loan Parade was a celebration to promote the government bonds that helped pay for the Allied cause in Europe. The city morgue, built to hold 36 bodies, was now faced with the arrival of hundreds within a few days. The entire city was quarantined, and nearly 12,000 city residents continued their eternity. Overall, in the United States, 5 out of every 1,000 people fell victim to the flu. In the rest of the world, the death toll was much worse. In Latin America, 10 out of every 1,000 people continued their eternity. In Africa, it was 15 per 1,000, and in Asia, it was as high as 35 per 1,000. It is estimated that up to 20 million people continue their eternity in India alone. 10% of the entire population of Tahiti continued their eternity within 3 weeks. In Western Samoa, 20% of the population continued their eternity. More people continue their eternity from the flu than from all the battles of World War I combined. It was September 28th in the year 1928 that Sir Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. Sir Alexander Fleming was a young bacteriologist when an accidental discovery led to one of the great developments of modern medicine on September 28th in 1928. Having left a plate of Staphylococcus bacteria uncovered, Fleming noticed that a mold that had fallen on the culture had killed many of the bacteria. He identified the mold as Penicillium notatum, similar to the kind found on bread. In 1929, Fleming introduced his mold by a product called penicillin to cure bacterial infections. And another example of our awesome English language, Penicillium notatum or Penicillium notatum can be pronounced either way. All historic information divulged and documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com.